Board of Adjustments and Appeals meeting to order. Ms. Warwick, will you please take the roll?
Ms. Smith? Ms. Flynn? Present. Ms. Sheldorn?
Here.
Mr. Elstrom?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Here.
Mr. Friesen? Mr. Riger?
Here.
Mayor Finn?
Here. Thank you. There are 6 members present, so 5 votes. 5 affirmative votes are required to grant a variance or appeal. This board is authorized to grant or deny a variance by Part 3, Section 60 of the Englewood City Charter. Anyone aggrieved by a decision rendered by this board may appeal that decision to a court of record. However, such appeal must be made within 30 days of the board's decision. Any approved variance is effective at the end of the appeal period. Building permits for construction associated with an approved variance will not be issued until the appeal period is ended. Building permits must be obtained and construction began within 180 days of the variance's effective date. Procedure for the meeting is that the case will be introduced and an overview will be given by staff. Applicant will present their request and reasons that the variance should be granted. Proponents will be given an opportunity to speak. Opponents will address the board, and then if needed, staff will address the board again. So at this time, I will open the public meeting for case VAR2018-002. It's Brandis Meeks of Urban Land Acquisitions, and the applicant is requesting a variances to reduce the required ground floor commercial space from the required 50.1% to 0% to develop 5 townhomes, and also a reduction to the minimum required width for a 2-way parking aisle from the required 24 feet to 20 feet. These variances are to section 16-6-1.c.4 and table 16-6-4.2 of the Englewood Municipal Code. I have verification of the publication and posting of the subject property. Staff, could you please give us an overview?
Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that you will tell the truth in this proceeding before the Board of Adjustment and Appeals?
I do.
State your name.
My name is Brooke Bell. I'm a planner with the Community Development. Good evening. Tonight we have 2 variance cases before us on the same property, and we'll sort of try and treat them each individually. So I'm going to give you an overview to the site. Okay, so the site is located at 3246 South Sherman Street. You can see Sherman Street right here. It's just a block. I'm sorry, Lincoln Street. Lincoln Street is just a block east of Broadway. It's got Floyd to the south, Eastman to the north. And it's about mid-block on Lincoln Street. It's a 50-foot by 100-foot, 125-foot lot. And I want to just show you some of the zoning around it. This red area is the MUB1 zone district. That is mixed-use central business district zoning. And this little piece of it pops up to the north. It's the only part of the B1 that heads up to Eastman. There's also a small portion of it over here on the west side of Acoma that does that. In the middle here, a little bit lighter reddish brownish, is the MUB2. That's mixed use general arterial business district. And then to the east is the MUR3B. It's a high density residential zone district with a neighborhood preservation overlay. The yellow you see are R2B zone districts. Those are medium density, medium to low, but they allow multi-unit dwellings in those districts. And then to the far northeast is R1C. So downtown is kind of to the south here. This is the King Soopers parking lot. This is the St. Louis Church. So that's a little bit of the surroundings. This is an aerial of the property. You can see the subject property is in red. It's got a large parking lot to the south of it that I believe is owned by the church. There are 2 commercial uses on the west side of the street. One of them is a back and spine, and I think the other is a dialysis. The rest of the block is comprised of single-family homes as well as multi-unit dwellings. This is a 4-unit dwelling up here. This is a 11-unit apartment over here, and then again a smattering of duplexes and single-family homes. Oh, and again, it's a little bit hard to see because it's blue. I'll have to put my glasses on, but and the applicant can perhaps add to this, but there were, I believe, 3 neighbor notifications that went out, and those are circled in blue. This is the applicant's site plan. You can see Lincoln Street here on the west, the alley on the east, and the applicant is, the first variance that the applicant is requesting is there is a requirement in the MUB1 and MUB2 zone districts to incorporate a commercial use into 50% of the ground floor space. The applicant is requesting that percentage be taken down to 0. The second variance request is for this concrete drive on the north side of the property to, the applicant was originally requesting a 2-way drive that would be 20 feet wide. The Unified Development Code states that it should be 24 feet wide for a two-way drive and 22 feet wide for a one-way drive. And I think the applicant can add a little bit to this, but since the original application for the variance, there's been some discussions and I believe the applicant would like to take this and keep it at a 20-foot wide drive, but make it one-way instead of two-way. So that would still be a variance going from a 22-foot one-way drive down to a 20-foot one-way drive. With that, I guess the only other things I would add is that some of the traffic counts on these streets on Broadway in this area, traffic counts are approximately 28,000 vehicles a day. That's combined north and south. On Lincoln, there's less than 1,000. It's in the hundreds of vehicle counts per day both ways. And then if you were to jump over a couple of streets to Logan, it jumps back up to 8,000 to 10,000 vehicle trips per day. That's not in your staff report. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Could you said there are multi-unit. Where are those again?
This is a 4-unit complex. There are a couple of duplexes up here.
Okay.
A 2-unit, and then over, where is that? This is Sherman. On Sherman, there is a 11 unit on the 3200 block, 3201 South Sherman. There's an 11-unit apartment complex.
Does the board have any other questions for staff?
I do. Does the current property as designed, does it meet that minimum 16-foot wide one-way access to the public street?
Let me go back to this. Yeah, I should add in that in the staff report, currently the way this is shown, it is a 2-way drive, so there is no outlet to Lincoln. It is 20 feet from that end all the way to the alley. Traffic put a comment in, and that's what's in the staff report. And what traffic was saying was, first of all, make it a one-way if you're going to make it narrower. And so this would have to be opened up to Lincoln. But they were also saying at these two ends where it meets the street and the alley, make it 16 feet. In fact, they'd prefer a narrower width because it helps highlight that it's one way. If it were two-way, they'd want 24 feet where it met the street and the alley. Traffic further recommended that this width be essentially 22 feet. But that was a recommendation. They have less sort of jurisdiction on the private property itself. They have more jurisdiction where it meets the street and the alley. So they recommended 22 feet. The applicant is proposing 20, and you'll see in the staff report that 20 feet I think could be workable. It's not open to the public. You've got basically 5 residents that would be using that every day. So, but that's really for the board to consider.
Okay, thank you.
So would the properties to the north of this also would they seek a similar variance if they wanted to develop in a similar fashion, or would they be similarly situated?
They would be. They would be.
Go ahead. Yeah. We're a little more informal, so you don't have to wait for me necessarily to call on you or ask for a point of order. So go ahead.
Thanks. So which way is the one way? Would they be accessing from the alley and then exiting onto Lincoln? Or
I'm going to have the applicant ask that. I don't think it really matters too much to traffic or the community development department. You do have to be, in the current configuration, it would probably be better to enter off the alley, depending on how this gets narrowed down to 16 feet, because you can have some sight distance issues with this garbage dumpster being right where the drive meets the alley. So it's conceivable that if this gets narrowed down and cars are further away from that dumpster, that wouldn't come into play. But certainly if you were entering off the alley, then you don't have that sight distance issue. And then this back here is far enough away from the sidewalk to not have that issue. So I think it can work either way, but maybe the applicant can tell us how they would intend to, which way that traffic would go.
and then is this referred to the fire department? Does the fire department access on that driveway, or do they, if there's an emergency, are they accessing off of Lincoln?
They would be off of Lincoln.
And they wouldn't need to pull in there?
Correct.
Okay. And then I had a question about the first variance on the commercial use.
Yes.
In looking at the code, it says the board will not consider a zoning variance application relating to the use of the property. And this section that you're asking us to provide a variance on is called residential use.
Correct.
So can you address, does the board have authority to hear this variance?
Yes, yes. So you are correct that the board is not allowed to hear use variances. So I'd give an example of that. Let's say somebody wanted to open a, not in this zone district, but let's say in a residential zone district, wanted to open a small restaurant or a auto repair shop in a residential zone. The board would not be able to hear that kind of a variance. But the board is allowed to hear variances related to dimensional requirements. So the 50% requirement is under dimensional standards in the Unified Development Code. And so they are requesting, well, let me back up. Multi-unit residential, which is what this is a permitted use in the MUB1 zone district. They are merely asking to take the percentage of the commercial requirement and take it from 50% down to 0%.
Or where is the 50% requirement?
Where is it located in the code? It is, let me, that's in 16-6-1.
C4.
C4.
It's right after the table.
Thank you.
My question's similar to that, but it's more about the intent of the district. Is the intent of the MUB1 district to be primarily commercial in nature?
It's a mixed-use district, and really to allow both mixes of commercial uses as well as residential uses. Okay. What we're finding is that some of these properties that are not on Broadway or not on a heavily traveled street and are surrounded by other residential uses that don't have commercial associated with them are not, the market doesn't respond to the commercial aspect of it.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for staff? All right.
Thank you.
At this point, the applicant may come forward to testify in the case. If you could please state your name and address to the secretary who will administer the oath.
Brandis Meeks.
You swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that you will tell the truth in this proceeding before the Board of Adjustment and Appeals?
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. The address is 4155 East Jewel Avenue, Denver, 80222.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Meeks. And we've gotten the package that you submitted. Do you have anything you want to add before we pepper you with questions on why you would like these variances and why they should be approved?
Really, I would say that the commercial aspect of it is just not necessary, and it's sort of impossible considering the traffic count. If I built a commercial space, it would pretty much just be bankrupt and sitting in Englewood for closure. And then as for the actual drive aisle, we've done plenty of traffic studies, and we've built these plenty of times before, and 20 feet one way is just plenty of space for a vehicle to be able to back out and drive off of the lot. So that's it.
Questions for the applicant from the board?
I understand that your opinion that 20 feet is sufficient. Why can you not meet the code?
So the problem is that in order to be able to make sure that we can get large enough two-car garages to be able to offer that to the residents, we just simply need to shrink it by 2 feet.
Why can't you shrink the interior living space of the units?
Because then they would be too small, and then the actual garages would be too small.
What are the square footages of the units?
Pretty much, when it's said and done, we haven't, because we're waiting on a variance, we haven't taken it all the way to engineering and architectural, just simply because of the cost of that. I just couldn't, you can't move forward unless we have some sort of, variance that we can at least move forward at some point. I would say each unit is probably going to be, I would say, give or take about 1,500 square feet for a townhome.
Confirm the footprint is 19 by 17 foot?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
How many floors are
Right, that'd be 18 feet. It'd be 18 feet wide and 19.6 depth.
How many floors are you anticipating to reach that approximately 1,500 square feet?
It'd be 3 stories.
And that's without the commercial?
Yeah, no commercial, just residential.
Is the ground floor all the garage? Is it all garage?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, it'll be garage. We walk in garage and stairs up, and the main level living, and then the bedroom areas.
So what is the requirement for a garage? The length for a garage? So can they not get a 19-foot garage and the 22 feet of driveway?
So I think since you haven't done, as you said, full-blown, which I understand, architectural and engineered drawings, we're trying to get our head around the space-wise.
I mean, I can definitely, any question you have, I can walk you through as much as I can.
So, well, so you have a 50-foot wide lot.
Oh, just the,
Is this,
what is the actual top? Is it the red button?
yeah.
Here we go. Yeah, so you have 50 feet along Lincoln Street, and you have 125 feet depth, and then you have a 16-foot rear alley.
So let's walk along the 50-foot. So we have 50 foot, and then we have a concrete walkway that's 5 feet.
Yeah, so that's the 5-foot walkway is definitely
Setback.
Well, yeah, you have a 5-foot concrete walkway, which is pretty much standard in most municipalities for the fire department to be able to, get in there and have access, just, individuals, and then have access for if a truck is needed. However, a truck most likely would never go on there because it's not that deep.
And then you have, what's after 5 feet? You have,
Right here?
so there's 19 foot, but then there's another dimension. So after 5 foot,
Okay, so you have your 5-foot width.
yep.
Yes,
and,
sir.
And then what's from that wall to, is all that 19 feet?
This wall, are you asking about this wall?
Well, I'm reading, so I'm seeing a 19.6.
That's for the interior of the garage.
That's for the interior of the garage?
That does not count the entrance off the concrete walkway.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the actual entrance. This is the entrance right here, which is, that's pretty much 3 1/4 feet. Actually, no, excuse me. I'm sorry. It's 5 foot walk aisle, and then you actually have the depth of the units would be
19.6.
well. That's just for the garage space.
This is the garage.
You're pretty much be at about 22.
Okay.
Or excuse me, I'm sorry. It'd actually be 20.
23 inches.
Yeah, 23. Yes, ma'am.
You still have 27 feet.
Well, are you saying 27 feet left?
Yeah,
Well,
so then if we go to the,
the problem is you can't build a drive out. You still have your setback on either side. So if we, just right now, the only thing we can do is that 20 foot.
what's the setback?
Yeah, we can't build lot line to lot line, so you have setbacks on either side.
The driveway
5 foot
can't.
setback, you still got 22 feet.
Allowable. I thought it was allowable to have a driveway in a setback.
Mr. Bell, can you have a driveway and a setback?
Well, yes. So we don't need, in essence, a setback on the left. Or when we're looking at this, a setback to the north for the driveway. So I'm still confused on why we can't have a 24-foot drive. All right, got it.
Is the concrete screening wall existing on the property, or is that part of your new construction plans?
Well, that's part of the construction.
So most likely, that's what can't go into the setback.
Yeah, you have to have.
It's not the driveway that can't go into the setback, it's the concrete retaining wall.
Yeah, you have a wall right here.
It's a fence.
No, well, it's actually so when you cantilever over, it's not a fence. It's actually it's a wall.
Oh, because you're actually having, that's part of the structure
Yeah.
that's coming up.
Yeah,
I understand
just-
now.
So it's a wall, and then this will be an actual fence towards this side.
Okay.
So have you thought about redesigning so you can have a landscape on the north edge? And that way you can have your minimum single 22 feet? And then you have to do the overhang either in the front or somehow adjust your exterior space?
So I can definitely speak to the landscaping that we've pushed the landscaping.
No, I'm talking about landscaping on the north. In lieu of a concrete wall to divide the north property from your driveway, since you have more than enough feet to move the single drive into the setback.
Are you saying this wall up here?
Yes.
Oh, that wall, it cannot be any smaller than it is.
It doesn't have to be a wall. You haven't designed the property yet.
No, well, so that's the thing is that it does have to be a wall because it has to cantilever over.
You can redesign. That's why I'm asking if you thought about redesigning. So there is no wall. There's no cantilever.
Oh no, we've talked through that, and it can't happen. I mean,
Why?
because it won't support the structure. Without that wall, the structure can't be supported.
So you have gone into design.
Well, we've sat down, we've done meetings, and we've done this in the past. I mean, we've built these before, and so we know it can't be done without that wall.
But you could redesign the units to accommodate the code for the driveway, since there's not much design in yet.
Not without the wall, because we need the wall to support.
Okay, you're not answering the question.
Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize. So would you ask it again, and I'll do my best to try to answer it?
Go ahead.
Where does the floor overhang, where is that supported beneath it? That line that's to the south of the concrete wall that we're talking about?
So to the south of the,
Yeah, where it says floor overhang above.
so that's the actual unit itself.
Okay.
So this is you can't see it. So this is pretty much just your main parking level. The actual units themselves they cantilever over. So this is actually the second story.
And so
And the support beams, so you can imagine this line right here, these will be support beams. It'll be cantilevered over, it'll be supported by this wall.
okay. So it's supported by that actual wall?
Yes, sir. 100%.
So, okay.
I mean, it'll be steel, you'll have steel beams going from here to here, and this wall is where it's supported.
Okay.
So why couldn't we were talking about square feet. Why couldn't you have the 24-inch drive lane and just have 4 units?
I mean, that is a possibility, but it really does make the project not very feasible, just for the construction cost itself.
Well, the return cost in your mind.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely want to make a return on the money spent, yes, sir.
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's,
Oh, I understand that.
I understand that, yeah, so it's, okay.
You also could make it not garages, right? If they were open, if it was just open parking, like you see with an apartment building.
So you're saying like a podium, where it's just you just drive in and everything is just open air underneath?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's just financially that's definitely impossible. I mean, a podium building at that point, if I'm doing a podium building, there's no way I can do a podium and only build 4. At that point, you have to go.
What if you did 5, but you did you didn't do a garage so that you could meet the code?
Well, I guess what I was saying is, so if you think about I understand. I feel like I understand what you're saying when it comes to like a podium construction, meaning that everything's sort of open. Maybe you have some columns that support what's overhead.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what I'm trying to explain is that the cost of that is so great that if you built only 5 properties on top of a podium, you would go bankrupt. It's just so expensive. You can't do that. So in order to, you can do a podium, but once you get into podium builds, at some point, you just simply keep going because now you've spent so much. So instead of having 5 just townhomes, you have an apartment building because it's so expensive to build a podium build. I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Does the board have any other questions for the applicant at this time?
I just had a question about the neighbor notifications. I don't know if you can answer this or
That would be
staff.
Yeah, maybe both.
Were any of the, from what we see in our materials, it doesn't look like any of the notifications signed or indicated whether they had an objection or not?
Yeah, we asked everyone, and everyone simply said they just didn't. They couldn't say yes or no at this point. Okay. I assumed that was because they were going to come to this variance meeting. Okay. And then one gentleman, which you have is sort of like, he actually signed it, but then he came to my office 2 days later, and he said that someone, maybe I think it was his wife or somebody said, "Oh, I can't believe you signed that. Go to the office." And he physically came in, and my front desk handed him the paper, and he physically ripped it off. So, which is fine. He still submitted it. And then there was one of the properties. I don't know how to change it so you can see the ones we placed. But there's one woman who actually owns both the houses, and so we only went to her. She owns both the houses behind us.
Are there any other questions from the board for the applicant at this time? Thank you, Mr. Meeks. I think that's it for right now. Yes, please. So are there any people present who wish to speak in favor of this request, other than the applicant? Are there any persons present who wish to speak in opposition of this request? All right. And did everyone sign who wishes to speak in opposition? Have you signed? Did you sign this? Okay. But you can't speak right now then. We got to get you sworn in. So real quick, before we go through this, since we do have a lot of people here, you guys just need to understand that what we're considering is not if he can build the 5 townhomes or not. That is not what we are up here deciding. That's already been decided by the zoning in the code. The only thing that we have rule over are the variances. And we have 4 criterions that we have to address each variance. And the criterions are, the first one is that a unique physical condition exists, such as size, shape, location, topography, or surroundings which are peculiar to the land or structure involved, which deprive the applicant or privileges enjoyed by others' properties in the vicinity. The second is that the variance is consistent with the intent of the zone district regulations to secure public health, safety, and welfare. The third is that the variance will not permanently impair the use or development of adjacent conforming properties or alter the essential characteristic of the neighborhood. And the fourth is the variance is not self-imposed difficulty or hardship. So when you get up here, if you could address the variances, I'll give you a little leeway, but if you start straying off the variances, I'm going to have to cut you off because we don't have power to do some of that other things. So the first, is it Dickerson? If you could please come forward and state your name and address and take the oath from the secretary.
My name is Colleen Dickerson, 2835 South Pennsylvania Street, here in Englewood.
Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that you will tell the truth in this proceeding before the board of adjustment?
I do.
Ms. Dickerson.
Well, since you're limiting us to those certain criteria, it seems to me that it does definitely change the character of the neighborhood. A 3-story building south of a single-family residence definitely impacts that single-family residence and all the others. I haven't heard anything about bulk plane issues, but it's a 3-story building would definitely cut off the sunlight to the property to the north. And there are proposed 10 cars, 2 per 5 unit. I would not want a property line where cars can go right within 5 feet of my house. 10 of them on a daily basis, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day.
Yes, ma'am.
It definitely would change the character of the neighborhood.
And I understand that, but the problem we're faced here is the variance is not, they have every right with the way it's zoned to build that structure. The variance that they're asking for is the drive and the commercial use.
Well, if the commercial use doesn't go away, the drive doesn't matter, does it? And the zoning does ask for that. And you're asking for a variance on that. What's the point of the zoning, then, if you're just going to grant a variance?
So you're in favor of, you're okay if that structure gets built, and then there's also a commercial use underneath it?
I think that that is the requirement of the zoning.
So you're...
But I'm not in favor of a 3-story building.
But that's not what we're considering here. We can only consider the drive and the commercial use.
Well, then, if the zoning requires a commercial use, then they have to do that. But it's still going to change the character of the neighborhood.
And I
either way.
I would agree with you. And it's something we need to consider. Does the board have any questions?
Ms. Dickerson, where do you live? Do you live in the neighborhood?
I don't live exactly in the neighborhood. I live 5 blocks over.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dickerson. Mr. Cohen, if you could raise your hand and state your name and address and get sworn in by the secretary, please.
My name is Doug Cohn, 3051 South Marion Street.
Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that you will tell the truth in this proceeding before the Board of Adjustment and Appeals?
I do. Just a couple of questions for you. I was on the Adjustments and Appeals Board for a while back, and new developments required green space. And there was 554 square feet of green space on the picture. But if you put through the single-lane driveway and take out that front wall, there's only going to be about enough space for like one really small evergreen bush. And I guess I'm wondering about if there are any kids who might end up living in that building, where are they going to play?
And that's something we can discuss with staff, but I think the way that this is zoned and the area it's in is I'm not sure they're required to have any green space.
Well, yeah, that may have been a rule that got changed since I was on the board. But in the olden days, like way back when, like till like 2012 or so.
We can only deal with what the rules on the books right now.
And I guess just one other comment.
Yes, sir.
One of the criteria that Ms. Dickerson talked about was the character of the neighborhood. I'm a history guy, and the house that was built in 1915 that the applicant is wanting to replace, and it was most likely built by either Thomas Foley, who was a city councilman, or by Norman McClellan, another city councilman. McClellan's the guy McClellan Reservoir is named after. It came out of a catalog. I don't know if you guys know this story. Montgomery Ward's or Sears, you saw a picture, you ordered your house. They cut the sticks and sent it to you on a railroad car. And then one of these guys picked it up at the railroad station and brought it over to your property and built your house for you. This one 1915 was before indoor plumbing was an option. That became an option in 1916. I like these old houses. And I'm not sure, with Mr. Bell, on the east side of Lincoln, going down towards Eastman on the map, he was indicating other multiple properties. There is that fourplex on the corner on the west side. All the rest of the houses looked to me, when I drove by there this afternoon, like they were individual single-family homes. And I think a three-story structure would kind of interfere with the character of the street.
And while I would agree with you, we can't consider that.
But that's one of your four criteria.
No, sir, we can't consider the height. The height, it's within the city code.
I'm not talking height. I'm talking changing a block that has single-family homes into a multiple. And I realize the MU1 zoning that was changed by the council in 2009 allows that MU1 overlay that allows that kind of infill. I didn't like it then, don't like it now.
I understand that.
Anyway.
But that's not within our
listening to me.
purview, sir. That's not, and you've sat on this board and you understand that that's not within our purview. The only thing we have to consider are the two variances in front of us, which is the commercial and the driveway width.
Right. Well, scribble down on their green space too.
We'll have,
I'm messing with you.
we'll, we'll discuss that with staff. We'll have staff come back up. Thank you, sir. Ms. Searfoss? And if you could state your name and address and raise your hand, take the oath from the secretary, please.
Cynthia Searfoss, 3297 South Downing, Englewood, Colorado.
Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that you will tell the truth in this proceeding before the Board of Adjustment and Appeals?
Yes. And I have the same issue as that, and you cannot do anything about this. It's going to totally degrade the character of that neighborhood because the three-story apartment building they're talking about is on a different block. You can't even see it at all from that street. I walked the street. I looked at it. I love those little bungalow apartments down at the end of the street. They're little one-story bungalow blonde brick apartments. Those are charming.
They are.
And there are some charming houses on Lincoln in that street that I really hadn't appreciated before. And I think this is really, really unfortunate because I live on the block where you could use the argument that there's the four-story building one block from me on 1100 East Girard, and then plonk one of these on my property one day because my lot is so big. And it's very sad because it is degrading the residential nature of Englewood. And that's what I came to say.
Well, thank you, and I would agree with you a lot of that. I have a question for you. Considering this project, if you were faced with having it with commercial or without, what would your leanings be? Would you want a commercial space there, or would you not want a commercial space there?
I don't like the project.
You understand I can't stop the project.
They're looking to put commercial in on 1100 Girard, too, and that's a disaster for my neighborhood. So you're asking the wrong person.
Well, no, I think it's a fair question, though. I can't stop the project. You understand that. So if it goes forward, if they decide to build it, would you prefer to have a commercial part of it or not a commercial?
Well, I think if you had a commercial part of it, at least there might possibly be less traffic because maybe at night there wouldn't be that traffic in the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Miss White? And if you could state your name and address for the secretary, and she'll give you the oath, please.
My name is Maureen White. My address is 3271 South Grant Street.
You swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that you will tell the truth in this proceeding before the Board of Adjustment and Appeals?
I do. I have to start by saying I agree with most of what's been said. I want to clarify one thing. So I'm in the historic preservation overlay.
Okay.
We put historic in front of it or not. So we are immediately to the east of this. And I know you can't do anything about it, but the zoning should never be split in an alley. It should have been split down Lincoln Street, because this is a residential side to that street. And so a business doesn't belong in there. But in answer to your question, would I rather see a business? I would like you all to stick with what the zoning is, stop granting variances, because of what we see going on in Englewood is such a hodgepodge of things happening. And I hear you asking the applicant to consider redesigning, and there is no give on his part. So I would rather see a business come into that.
So you would rather see what has been stated on that side of the street is purely residential? You would like to see a business and then residential overlay on top?
As opposed to his design that I can't picture seeing that anywhere else in Englewood, even in the new buildings. I have yet to see that kind of design of 5 units, for one thing. I hear you ask him about downsizing, no give. So I'm asking you to think about the residents instead of the builders for a change, because that's what we're seeing, you know, especially in our older homes. We are getting calls on the phone. We are getting letters in the mail asking us to sell. It's like a fire sale going on in the older neighborhood of Englewood, so the developers can come in and do these monster duplexes and things that do not match the existing structures at all.
And I understand your frustration. But you understand that we have no control over that.
Right.
It's a city council issue.
Putting out there, and we do deal with city council and anybody else, and we'll be doing more of that because it's awful.
I understand that.
So I'd rather see a business, because chances are it would be a small business and there'd be less cars than those neighbors would be looking at right now.
So, so you would rather have a commercial and a residential, even though it's a huge...
Rather than what this gentleman has.
Rather than just all residential.
I've seen what happens. They'll start on the block, and then people will not want to live next to it. They'll look at selling their property. More developers, if not this particular applicant, others will come in and figure they can do the same thing, and the property values will go down for the homeowners, and it'll be, do we want to live here, or shall we get out while we can get some money for our property?
Okay. Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. White. Mr. Tyndall. And sir, if you could please, when you get to the podium, state your name and address for the secretary who will give you the oath.
My name is Gerald Tyndall. I live at 3221 South Grant Street.
Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that you will tell the truth in this proceeding before the Board of Adjustment and Appeals?
I do. Well, I pretty much, since we're so limited on what we can talk about.
Yes, sir.
I agree with most of what's been said. But you are totally changing the character of the neighborhood, one block at a time. These townhomes do not match any of the other single-family homes that are around it. You're basically talking about building a bunch of rectangles on top of parking. And I think that because of the number of cars involved, the number of people living there, I think it's totally out of character with the neighborhood. I think that this is kind of the beginning of high-density housing and literally crowding out the single-family homes. I am particularly concerned because all of this is occurring in District 1, which we don't even have representation right now since Joe Jefferson left. And so there's an architectural character to the old part of Englewood. This matches absolutely nothing, not even the things that were done in the 70s. And so I'm definitely against that. I don't think it should be commercial either. I just simply don't like the project. But if it has to be something, I would rather that it continue being residential on that block rather than commercial. There's already enough commercial on the west side of that street without moving into commercial on the other side. I also have a question. The way this is drawn ends up being totally different than I expected. To the south of these units, is that still going to be a parking area?
I believe so, because the applicant doesn't own the parking area, and I think the parking area is owned by the church.
Okay, but that would still continue to exist?
As far as I know. I don't have any information to indicate otherwise. Earlier, I think it was staff that said it was owned by the church, and I know that the church uses the parking lot, so I'd assume, with everything I know, it would still be a parking lot.
Well, I would assume with this type of development going in that we're only talking a few years before all of that would become the same sort of thing. So I think, again, we're really increasing the density all around through there, whether it's the parking between the alley in Lincoln or the alley in Sherman, which is all parking now, that all of that is going to be developed into these type of units. I've seen these type of units that are going in the 3400 block of South Washington, and from what I understand, these are going to be very similar to that. And
again, we have no control over that, sir.
I realize that, and I just think it's not in the best interest of the neighborhood.
I understand that. And
so I'm just saying, I guess, make it residential, forget about any kind of commercial. Apparently there's nothing you can do about the size of these. The height, as was mentioned earlier, will totally cut out any sunlight to the properties next to it.
I understand, and that's, believe me, that's something that's been discussed before, but that's, as long as it's required, as long as it's allowed by code, I can't do anything about that here, sir.
Okay. It appears that there's going to be a lot of variances to code here just to put this in. And I really think that the variances should be overruled, because I think that what we're getting here is the developer telling the city, how it's going to be rather than the other way around.
I understand that.
So I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tyndall. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak in opposition? If you could please approach, state your name and address, and take the oath from the secretary.
Scott Reynolds, 3244 South Lincoln.
Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that you will tell the truth in this proceeding before the Board of Adjustment and Appeals?
I do.
So, where do you live?
Right next to it.
So you're the house directly to the north?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Lived there 30 years. It's a 1923 house. We knew with the business zoning, there is a 3-floor limit in the B1. So he's going up to that, and I agree, there's not much you can do about it. It'll cut off our sunshine and our privacy that we've enjoyed for 6 months shy of 30 years. A lot of flowers will go away. Our roses are pollinator family out there. So it's a concern. I know we can't do anything about that. course, there's 2 stalls per unit. They will have, company. They will have, other folks along in the street. And there's a lot of room right now. I understand the Colorado Spine Institute has sold their building to a pain management clinic. And they're going to be a much busier practice. That was my surgeon last year, so I know them quite well. And DaVita's going to keep operating. Are you sure about the church owning the gravel lot or the paved lot across the alley to the east?
I'm not sure. We can ask staff when staff comes back up, but staff said that that I thought the church owned the lot, and perhaps the applicant would know something either, but that's the way I took it, is that we can have that clarified.
Well, I know they've, for the first 20 years, they were real shy on snow removal. So I called the church several times, and even the pastor, the priest didn't even know if they owned it or not. So at least they are shoveling. They're getting to it. I also solidified that boarded up home, and I think we all agree that it would be better for all property values to get rid of the boarded up home.
So could we discuss the commercial aspect? How's your feeling on that?
Okay, so we attended the city council meeting for DaVita dialysis. We thought, well, fine, a clinic, not much noise. Waste management gets there after 4 in the morning sometimes. The nurses come up with their boom boxes going inside their cars, shut windows, and I can still hear it through triple pane windows. And that starts, anywhere from 3 to 5 a.m. So that was a concern. In other words, we didn't know enough to ask what would be the hours of operation of DaVita dialysis.
Right.
So now they're operating 3 days a week. But, Saturday morning I've had to go to waste management, tell your guys, the police will ticket your garbage. So I talked to him first. I don't call the police first. I says, well, if you'd come here after 7, let us sleep till 7 on Saturday, it would be nice. So that was kind of a surprise through all these years that, you're getting semis, deliveries from Cardinal, big stuff, boom, 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 they've got electric pallet jacks, it's heavy stuff they're moving and all. So whether it's commercial or residential, I'm going to be on it as far as our noise ordinances, parking, blocking the alley, whatever it comes to, because the property sits probably 4 foot off of our property line. We will be watching property lines too. The old owner that sold it to Mr. Meeks, he thought we were on his property, and my wife has been in construction, and she got the property record. So everything has to be right as far as property line. I've got a fence there. I don't know if that's going to get replaced with this. I've done some bolstering. That fence is in good shape. A couple other areas. I'll work that out with your construction manager.
So it's your view is you don't care if it's commercial, residential, or just residential in that space?
Well, we'd love it if it was a single-family home.
Right, but that's not under consideration.
Whatever it comes to, it's all going to be better than a boarded-up house. The code officer told me that the boarded-up house had burned 3.5 years ago across the alley to the east. That they can't do anything. The doctor at the clinic, that's one of the reasons he sold the clinic. He was getting tired of parking and all of his people parking next to this boarded-up house with the homeless people crashing in there, which I prevented by solidifying the gate further than Balfour did. The front door had one piece of lumber, kicked out the glass. I put on the other 2 pieces, non-reverse screws, and does help the police out that way. They haven't been showing up, but this will all be better. And the code officer said that there's a boarded up building can stay there for years as long as it doesn't present falling down danger.
Right.
So I think that's something the city council eventually needs. And the doctor was astounded that they wouldn't have some sooner time framework than nothing.
Right.
And I look forward to it in a way, but I don't look forward to losing the sun, and I can't do anything about that. But
I understand, sir.
once it comes down to it, we figure as some of these other folks, eventually that lot right to the south, the gravel one, could eventually turn into an apartment building, but the way the code is now, it could only go up to 3 floors. And you can't stand in the way of that. We know we can't prevent it.
Okay.
I'm just disappointed to lose the privacy and mainly the sunshine.
I understand.
And well, 17.4, I guess you're going to have kind of small, narrow garages. It's not quite 9 foot, but they're close.
Sir, yeah, you need to just talk to us rather than, perfect. Do you have anything else to add, sir?
No, thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Staff?
Wait.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep. One more in opposition. If you could state your name, address, and take the oath.
My name is Kendall Smith. I'm at 3240 South Lincoln.
Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that you will tell the truth in this proceeding before the Board of Adjustment and Appeals?
I'm 3 houses north of this.
Okay.
And Mr. Meeks, to my knowledge, your staff...
Sir, and again, you
To
can't.
my knowledge, Mr. Meeks' staff never contacted me. I don't know what the rules are as far as contacting neighbors around there.
Right.
They mentioned that they had talked to everybody. I was never spoken to. For the record, I'm excited about development here. I can't talk about this being too high density. I think it's a little aggressive. I understand return on investment, but that's not what's under consideration. What is how it might change the character of the neighborhood. And just as the city of Denver banned slot homes, this feels to me very much like a slot home, where the entrances don't face the street. And to me, I think that's a material concern here.
I agree. I think that that's something that the city council needs to address. The problem is that that's not something we can address.
I understand. And then secondly, to answer Mr. Taylor's question a little more accurately, you had asked staff if the other homes on this block could be developed in the same way. This is the only house on the east side of Lincoln that is at ground level. There's no way to do a drive. I don't think there's going to be any way to do a drive-through, one-way driveway for any houses going north unless you tunnel. All the rest of the houses are up on a hill.
So what's your feeling on the commercial aspect of it? Would you rather have a commercial, residential, or just residential?
I don't think I can answer that question without knowing what type of commercial. If it's a smoker-friendly store, no commercial.
Right. Which, and I understand that, but that's not something that, again, we have or we can consider.
I would lean more to just residential.
Okay.
And finally, I noticed on there it says paved alley. We currently don't have a paved alley.
Okay.
I'm curious, under this plan, is it just going to get paved down to Floyd, or will the entire alley be repaved?
And I don't know. That's something we can see if we can address with staff if they know or not.
Thank you for your time.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Are there any other people who are present who wish to address the board? Yes, ma'am. Please, if you need to approach, and if you could state your name again, and you're still under oath.
Colleen Dickerson, 2835 South Pennsylvania Street.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Dickerson.
Would you ask the question again?
Which question was that? That's I've asked a lot of
commercial
questions.
or residential?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Which would you, given, and you have to understand that we're tied. One of the things that's under consideration is we could grant no where they can't have any kind of commercial. So if there would be a preference, what do you think?
I would prefer you not grant a variance at all. And if he wants to do commercial and meet the code and the zoning requirements, maybe the project won't get built.
I understand that, but maybe it will.
And maybe it will. But if there's a
commercial.
reason for the code, I think it was a false premise, and doing that kind of thing, I think it came from a very bad place. And I know that over at Swedish, there were some areas that the staff wanted desperately to rezone to MU so they could build these gigantic apartment buildings. And the people that owned the property downgraded their zoning to the chagrin of staff. And now those people have died, so now staff is all eager to do the zoning again.
And
I
Ms.
think
Dickerson,
that's what
I
happened
understand
there.
that, but that's not what we're
I
considering.
think that's what happened there. It was a false premise. So if there is any, if there's any requirements for the zoning, that's what they have to meet. I don't think you should be granting variances.
Thank you for your time. Any other people present who wish to address the board? There are none. Staff, additional comments?
Sure. First of all, are there any questions?
Green space.
Green space.
For this lot, from what I remember looking at this district, I didn't think they had to have virtually any green space.
They do. They have to have, there's a requirement for 20% of the space, that 20% of the space be landscaped. That comes out to 1,200 square feet and some change. There are alternative methods of compliance on landscape plan. There's alternative landscape materials. Some of those aren't shown. They will have to comply with the landscape. For instance, there are green screens that you can get credit for in terms of a vine. We've talked about some vines or a green screen on the south side of the property and perhaps even on the north. So there are ways to achieve that landscape requirement. There's also provisions for rooftop gardens that can count towards the landscape requirement. So when you get right down to trees and shrubs, there's a requirement for two trees and 13 shrubs, and at least 50% of those have to be between the principal structure and the curb. So there are opportunities to do that. We would monitor that while they're preparing their construction drawings for a building permit.
Okay, because the site plan does not meet any of them.
Correct.
Got it, thank you.
The parking lot ownership, do we know who owns the parking lot?
I am not positive. I believe that's owned by the church, but I am not positive of that.
So you're
could be incorrect.
calling the priest a liar, sir? Is that what you're...
I wouldn't want to do that.
Okay.
No.
I'll discuss this with the father.
Yeah.
You might have to do confession.
I am not positive. It was my understanding, but I could be wrong on that.
Okay. And our attorney up here said that he also thought it was owned by the church. The city ditch runs through it. Are there any other questions from the board for staff that we, please?
I had a question on your staff report. You note that staff is looking at amending this zoning to address this commercial requirement. And so if this variance weren't granted, it sounds like at some point in the future, the zoning may be amended to where he wouldn't have to meet this commercial requirement. Can you tell us where we are in the process and how long that would be?
Yeah, it is in the process, and it has actually already gone through the Planning and Zoning Commission to remove the commercial requirement. At least what's proposed right now is to remove the commercial requirement in all of the MU B1 and B2 except for the 33, 34, and 3500 blocks of Broadway. So that has already been through the Planning and Zoning Commission. It has not gone to City Council yet. We're at an upcoming study session. We're going to start that process with City Council. I think our applicant, timing-wise, has had the property for a while and is concerned about the condition of it and wants to move forward.
And Planning Commission recommended approval, I assume?
They did.
Okay.
Of removing the commercial requirement.
Real quickly, so the code requires 24-foot drive width for a two-way street?
Correct.
22-foot for a one-way?
Correct.
Okay.
So I guess I could just kind of conclude with community development recommendations for each of the variances. On the first variance, to reduce the commercial use from 50% down to 0, the Community Development Department does recommend approval of that. In terms of the reduction in driveway width from 20 for a one-way drive from 22 to 20 feet. While we do think that's workable and physically possible, and that drive will be used primarily by those owners of those 5 units, we really don't have a recommendation one way or another on that. We would leave that for the board to consider.
Any other questions for staff from the board? Oh, please.
Yeah, I have a question. We've heard some testimony here about the character. Am I correct in understanding that single-family homes in the MUB1 district are legal nonconforming? That's not the intent of the district?
They are, that is correct. They are single-family homes in the MUB1 zone district are grandfathered, and they're legal nonconforming uses. You are allowed to have a multi-unit, but you're not allowed to have a new single-unit residential in that zone district.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any other questions for staff?
Thank you.
Before we close the meeting, do we want to hear from the applicant or staff or anyone else? All right, the public hearing is now closed. I would like to suggest that we split the 2 variances. How do the members feel about that?
So moved.
I need a motion.
I move that case VAR2018-002.
I just need a motion to divide the 2 variances first.
To make a motion on that variance to divide the commercial requirement versus the driveway requirement.
Perfect. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, and we're just going to do this by voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
So there's 1 negative, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 positive. That's over 2/3, so we carry. It passes. Yeah, it passes. All right, so we're going to divide the variance into 2 variances. And I need a motion to, we will address the commercial space first. I need a motion for the commercial space, please.
I move that case VAR 2018-002, 3246 South Lincoln Street be granted a variance to reduce the required ground floor commercial space from the required 50.1% to 0%.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, discussion. What's the board feeling?
I'm okay with no commercial.
And this is something that we've run up to before.
We did with the parking garages?
With the parking garages, there was the apartment also. So we've heard there's people for and against it. What are you guys' thoughts?
I'm struggling with the first criterion that there's a unique condition. This seems to be something that everyone in the district is struggling with. I also have some pause with the second criterion about the intent of the zone district. As it's written today, the intent is for residential to not be a primary use. It's allowed, but it's not. It's stated fairly clearly right now. So those are the 2 I'm struggling with.
Yeah, and I understand that. To me, what makes it unique is that the street is, that side of the street is all residential. And to me, then having a commercial on that side of the street, now suddenly you have commercial on that block. I think the intent of the zone district, number 2 is public health, safety, and welfare. I don't see how that impacts it.
It relates to what they were aiming for with the original drafting of, not that we can read
Right.
too much into it, but we can read what's in the code now. And it does state 16-3-2B1 states that, or in B it states that uses in these districts are primarily commercial in nature, and the residential development is incorporated into the retail businesses. I mean, that's a part of the general welfare intent.
Yeah, and to me that also goes to the beginning where you said it's mostly commercial. I think this is mostly residential. And we've struggled with these zones before, which is why I think the city is finally stripping out the commercial part. But
Which is my struggle. That's their job to do. That's not our job to do.
I understand that. But while it is their job to change that,
Right.
a variance can be granted.
Yes.
That's, so, discussion on this?
I still follow the city of Englewood where we have enough unused commercial space currently. And we have a huge apartment building that has a vacant commercial space currently, right on the corner of Broadway and South Floyd. So,
Which is on Broadway and not even Lincoln.
correct.
Thoughts from down there?
I agree with you on the first criteria that I think what is unique about this that addresses that criteria is the location of this property. It's a quiet residential street. I would never drive down that street looking for a coffee shop or some sort of retail use. I'm glad to hear that the city staff is bringing forward amendments to the zone district. That this doesn't make any sense to me, and I think especially in this location it doesn't, so I'm inclined to grant this variance.
Any other discussion? We can hash it out if you'd like, or we can vote. I think, and again, we've struggled with this before, so I understand the struggles. Which is why there's more than one of us up here voting.
Yeah, I wasn't a part of some of those discussions.
I understand that.
To me, this is different than the parking garage one we had, which is
Right.
a completely different zoning district. But yeah, there it does seem to be issues, not just with the zoning district, but in this vicinity that seem to be helping me out at least with feeling better about the first criteria.
Well, and that's, the city council with their zoning has done us no favors.
No.
Because I would never consider that block really mixed use. I would consider it residential.
This is the most generous zoning in the entire city of Englewood.
Any other discussion, or should we just vote?
My only thought on it is that I would like to, if we keep granting variances for this sort of thing, it sort of precludes anyone else considering it, and I'd like to see planning and zoning do what they need to do. That's my only thought on it.
Right. Well, I mean, part of that goes to also there's always going to be a variance board. So there's always exceptions.
I get that.
And
if I had to put a business like this on my street, on Fox Street, it would fail miserably if I were somehow forced to do that. That's not my thought that they should have to put something commercial in. I just would like to see zoning change in such a way that it makes more sense, I suppose.
Right. And I understand that. But the problem is we're not at that point. So we've got to consider this variance.
Sure.
And if it lives up to the 4 criteria, so you would say that you just don't think they would meet any of the criteria. Any other discussion? All right, why don't we vote on this variance? And just a reminder, we're voting a variance to reduce the required ground floor commercial space from the required 50.1% to 0%. And let's vote.
Ms. Flynn?
Oh, wait, everyone's got to lock in their votes. All right.
Ms. Flynn?
Since there's no one to the right of me, I will start. No, this is on. Okay. I voted yes on the reduction of the commercial space. The first criteria, I do believe it is unique. The east side of Lincoln is mostly residential. Second criteria, it is consistent with the zone district to have multiple family mixed use, not single family, but multiple family, so it still adheres to that one. The third criteria, the loss of the commercial space will not impair the use of the neighborhood. And the fourth criteria, it is not a self-imposed hardship. So I voted yes for those reasons.
Ms. Sheldorn?
I voted yes as well, and just to not belabor the point, I agree with Board Member Flynn and her reasonings for meeting the criteria.
Mr. Elstrom?
I voted no, essentially for the reasons that I spoke about.
Mr. Taylor?
I voted no. I could not find unique conditions in the first criterion. This is something that is a situation for all properties in the zone district along that block.
Mr. Riger?
I voted yes for the reasons I've already stated.
Chair Finn?
I voted yes, and that I believe that this area specifically, the physical condition is on this side of the street. It's all residential. And it makes sense to not have commercial.
You did 5, you only have 4.
So the motion failed.
Failed.
Motion failed. I need to get a motion for the second variance.
I move that case VAR 2018-002, 3246 South Lincoln Street be granted a variance to reduce the minimum required width for a two-way parking aisle from the required 24 feet to 20 feet.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion.
I don't like it.
I'm with you.
I don't see what's unique about a 50 by 125. Multi-units are popping up in my neighborhood, and I'm in R2B that, we're tinier than these lots. I don't like if they have a site plan, but nothing developed as to different opportunities to develop this piece of property, since it can't be a single-family home that's already been established by staff. So it has to be multifamily. That's not to discuss here, but the driveway is, I don't see how that's a unique condition in anything but number 4. It hasn't been built yet.
And to me, I don't understand. I mean, I couldn't find any uniqueness to reduce the driveway width. They could have gone to 22 for one way.
That's not even what's before us.
What's before us is exactly, but right. But I don't understand that they could do 22 feet if they're so squinched for space. But I think if it's two-way, it should be 24 foot. And to me, there's a safety aspect as well. Any discussion?
There's trucks out there.
I also will be voting against this variance because I do not think that the width of the lot also creates the necessity for the hardship. I also think that it's somewhat of a self-imposed hardship because really all that's been cited is sort of economic feasibility, and I think with some re-engineering, you can fit definitely more than one, maybe not 5, but units on there accommodating the required drive width.
And I would follow on with that feasibility is just not something we can consider really as a hardship.
Yep.
Absolutely. There's always redesign. Any other discussion on this? All right, let's vote.
Ms. Flynn?
I voted no. First criteria, I do not believe this is a unique property, such as size, shape, or location. The second criteria, I don't quite see how this pertains to a driveway, but there could be some public health, safety, and welfare if we have people entering and exiting a reduced width single lane driveway. Third criteria, to permanently impair the use or development. Again, you have then issues with landscape, alley access. And fourth, not self-imposed. While it has not been built yet, it's not the board's decision on economic feasibility. So I voted no.
Ms. Sheldorn?
I also voted no for the reasons I stated before, primarily that I don't believe that there are unique physical conditions that exist on the property which deprive the applicant of privileges enjoyed by other properties in the vicinity. And I also think that just his design is a self-imposed hardship, and if he redesigned the project, he could meet the driveway requirements without the necessity for a variance from this board.
Mr. Elstrom?
No, for reasons stated, and especially because it does appear to impair the use of adjacent properties.
Mr. Taylor?
I voted no for the reasons stated.
Mr. Riger?
I voted no for the reasons already stated.
Chair Finn?
I voted no for the reasons stated by Ms. Flynn. So that variance also fails. And we'll move on with the meeting. We have the minutes from January 10th, 2018. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? And I believe everybody was here except Kristen. You will abstain.
Right, I wasn't a member of the board,
Yes.
so I'll abstain.
So do I have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes from the Board of Adjustment Appeals meeting dated Wednesday, January 10th, 2018 at 7 p.m.
Can I get a second?
Second.
We'll do a voice vote. All in favor that can vote on this, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. I need approval of finding of fact for case VAR 2017-020, which is 3700 South INCA Street. Need a motion for the approval of finding of fact.
I'll make a motion that we approve the findings of fact for the case VAR 2017-020.
Is there a second?
Second.
We'll do a voice vote. All those that can vote on this, all in favor of approving the finding of fact, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm abstaining again.
One abstention. Approval of finding of fact is granted. Staff, you're back up. What's your...
The only thing I have is
Double decker. Thank you, staff. I know, that's your catching up for giving us last month off. Thank you, sir. Attorney's choice?
Nothing this evening.
Board member's choice. All right. Shelley, do you have anything for us? Yes, we have a new member. Hopefully she'll return for next month. All right, so we'll adjourn the meeting. The meeting's adjourned.